Call the meeting to order and acknowledge the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Notice to virtual attendees to sign up for public comment and question periods, Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak. Through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 is amended. The February 23, 2026 special meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Q&amp Sound Theatre, 380 Campbell Street, City. No objections, the motion carried. Also, through unanimous consent, I'll move that the February 23, 2026 special council agenda be adopted. Seeing no objections, that motion's carried. Ms. Larson, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We do have a member in attendance over Zoom, so I will now make an open call for comments. If there is anyone attending online via Zoom that would like to make a comment, you can do so now using the Q&A function. Before making a comment, you'll need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. I'll now do a call. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. No comments at this time.
Okay, presentation of reports. Moving right along to 5.1, draft financial plan.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This morning, we are going to have a look at the 2026 to 2030 financial plan, the second draft. Please feel free to ask questions or add any comments at any point during the presentation. As a quick overview at what's ahead of us this morning, we will go over the financial plan calendar, highlights of the public engagement session that was done on the financial plan, a few updates since the last special budget meeting, which was on November 6th last year, C&I levy balances, assessment comparisons and non-market change report, and a few highlights of the BC budget. After that, we will jump into the visional presentations and discuss any updates on operating budgets and capital projects since the last presentation in November, and also we will look at the property taxation and few directions that we can take in order to balance the budget, present the early budget approval requests for 2026, and we will end up with the next steps in the process. We do have a few updates when it comes down to dates this spring related to the financial plan. As we passed November 6th, the first special meeting on the budget, and November 18 with a public engagement session, which I will have a slide after this one. And today having the second special budget meeting. Following that, we do have a third special budget meeting on March the 25th. And following that, on April 14, we will bring forward the financial plan and the tax rates for first, second, and third reading, and on April 28th for adoption. The public engagement session on the financial plan was held on November 18 at the Tofino Community Hall. Was well attended with a positive engagement being observed throughout the event. Around 20 members of the community attended. Among the feedback received from the community was a need for a community pool, prioritization of water infrastructure, improvements to Gibson Street, and an overall respect for the environment. Also, Tofino remains open for information on budgeting process as we speak. Now we are turning our attention to the financial plan overview. The budget package that was attached to the agenda contains the consolidated budget, as well as the second draft of the financial plan, also the detailed project sheets for operating and capital. In the adopted financial plan for 2026-2030, the fiscal year 2026 has a 6% tax increase on base level taxation. That's being the amounts we charge for services outside of water and sewer, but also does not include capital and infrastructure levy, nor debt servicing. An important point to make here is that in order to balance the budget for 2026, we might not be able to stick to 6% increase, point that will be discussed later in the presentation. To point out also that the second draft of the financial plan as presented today is not balanced. In terms of contingency, that is set at 180,000. The capital and infrastructure levy is at 1.9 million as last year. And debt servicing for 2026 has a value of 36,000, which includes both short and long term. Mentioning here that assessment values, tax rates, and non-market change are subject to change with the revised, which is the final assessment roll, which we will receive it at the end of March. For fiscal year 2026, we have a 4% rate increase for water and sewer fees. That being a combination of inflationary increases as well as an increased costs with maintaining the current utility infrastructure. Also to mention here that for fiscal 2026, we have planned a review of utility rates with results and recommendations coming to council later this year. In terms of changes within the 2026 budget from the November 6 meeting, which was the first draft, we have added inflationary rates for hydro and fuel of 4% and 5% respectively. The rates being established based on market research. Also, the base taxation increased by 36,000 from 5.3 to 5.35 to 5.38. That is coming from BC assessment completed roll received at the end of December, and that changed that value. Also, we pay 442,000 from pay parking revenue reserve into the parking stall reserve. That note was coming from the financial statements, and the monies were borrowed from that restricted reserve, so we had it to put it back. As for the general fund, we have a reduction of 20,000 from 100K to 80K in the revenue coming from return on investment. That is being done after a review of the current economic environment and the changes that happened from November till now. We have also a slight increase in the tax penalty revenue that is on current taxes. Also a decrease in land lease and rental revenue values, a very slight one. For the water fund, we can see a slight decrease in the budgeted water changes. That is based on 2025 actuals received for the fourth quarter. So at the end of December, we received the actuals for the fourth quarter, where we can see a reduction in consumption in Q4 2025 versus Q4 2024. And in the process of budgeting for utility fee revenue, we take in general a more conservative side. Hence, the projected overall consumption increase in 2026, it's only 1% for residential increase and 1.3% for commercial increase over 2025. Regarding the sewer fund, we have the same reduction as per the water as we look at the same consumption data. We see an increase in operating costs for the treatment plants. Now that we have more data to establish a more accurate operating budget. Moving to reserves, we start with a general surplus reserve that ended 2024 at 1.6 million. Transactions for 2025 are at 154,000. To that, we added an interest earned revenue and allocations of 189,000, which are subtracted for an estimating ending balance of 1.3 million. Also, for the 2026-2030 financial plan, we put aside 665,000 for the South Force Main capital project. The water surplus reserve started 2025 at 578,000. 33,000 was needed to cover the 2025 deficits in the water operating, hence the additions. Also, we had 267 allocations for 2025 with an estimated balance for the end of 2025 of 277,000.
Mr. Andrei, we have a question here. Councillor Steer would like that.
Yeah, and it's regards to the last slide. Just so my understanding of our general surplus reserve at the end of 2025, 1.32. And then when we talk about those allocations of 665 for I think it was the water main capital project, does that mean that in essence then we're looking at, if I was to subtract the 665, 700,000, is that what we would be looking at in terms of what we have in reserves if I was to project out into 2026?
So
it's just for it's so I can have an understanding of what our reserve balance looks like, because we're going to have discussions about how we're going to balance it.
that is correct. The 665, it's over the 5 years, and it is coming out of the estimated balance that it's estimated for 2025.
Right, thank you.
For the sewer surplus fund, we started 2025 with a balance of 740. To that, we added a very healthy 2.4 million, all that's coming from the treatment plant project. Also for 2025, we had 188,000 in allocation. And as it stands right now, the estimated balance for the sewer fund is $2.9 million.
Tatiana.
Thank you. Mr. Andre, just for clarity, in the general fund, the water and the sewer fund for council's benefit, that balance is December 31st, 2024. Can you indicate whether the 2025 surplus calculation has been completed or not? And if that will change those balances?
The calculations haven't been completed. We are still in the process as the estimated value, but for 2024 they were completed.
Okay, so just going back to Councillor Steer's question, those bottom line balances in each of those funds are subject to change until the 2025 surplus calculation is completed. Yeah, so if council recalls, we did use some general surplus funds to balance last year's budget. And so I'm assuming that those amounts are not estimated in those balances at this time.
Just another question there. Were there any, were there extra unforeseen withdrawals from that reserve fund over the year? No. So they're pretty solid other than that. That's great. I know.
Capital infrastructure levy is still at 1.9 contribution, 1.9 million contribution for 2026. With the 8 categories adding to their bottom line between 50,000 and 2.5 million from now till the end of 2030 for the next 5 years. The increase in the overall CNI levy balance over the next 5 years is 4.4 million, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. And in that value, we did include the allocations already scheduled to be spent. Saying that, we are currently in the process of developing a new capital and infrastructure levy schedule that will use cost replacement as the driver, aligning the asset replacement schedule with a sustainable service delivery.
Councillor Steer has a comment.
Thank you, through the chair. Just so I understand, what you just explained was that eventually we will be moving to a model where it'll be on cost replacement. And I'm just curious, maybe it's a general question. When we look at that, as we know, cost escalations year over year are somewhat unpredictable. How is, I don't know if you can explain to the neophyte, how does that make our cost estimates more robust? Does that question make sense?
Thank you for the question. We will include inflationary rates as well in the replacement costs. But basically it follows the asset management strategy, and it follows the asset replacement values that will be established for each asset. That includes terms and situations where inflation has to be included into those costs. So the short answer is yes. Thank you. Turning now our attention to BC assessments completed roll that was received on December 31st, 2025, and comparing it with the revised version of last year. We can see a slight increase under utilities and also under business and other. But the bigger increase is coming in in rec and non-profit, with an add-on of about 2 million, which we will look into the next slide. And here we can see the non-market change report. Basically a comparison between the looking at the increases coming from the non-market change reports for the completed role. It follows the same percentages as on the last slide. To point out here that the residential, the 3 million comes from single family improvements. And for the rec and non-profits, we have 1.6 million in land value increase, and the rest of 800,000 comes from improvements. Hence the values increasing or increases. In terms of the BC budget presented last week, we were shown a deficit of 13.3 billion. The intention is of reducing it over the next 3 years. Also, one of the highlights is income taxes for lowest tax brackets will increase from 5 to 5.6%. Also, higher property taxes expected for foreign owners and high-value homes. Not the least, certain professional services are now subject to PST. Architectural, engineering, geoscience services, accounting and booking services as well. And PST will apply to rental property and strata management as well.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt on the budget highlights, but I did want to point out a couple of things that will affect our local folks here in terms of the higher property value and the increase in the taxation on those property taxes. There are many people in this community whose property values, they've been here for a long time, their property values are going to be high, and now we're going to be seeing them, I don't want to use the word penalized, through no fault of their own, and will be paying higher property taxes. In conjunction with that, the new the deferral is now going to be, I believe it's interest compounded now. So once again, it's going to add, unfortunately, our beautiful location and our property values are going to impact people at a very localized level. So this will play into my conversations later on about how and what tools we have in terms of reducing our overall, making our balanced budget a little more fair to those that may be impacted severely. Just as a prelude.
Politics. There are a couple other things to note in the BC budget that will impact local taxpayers that I just wanted to mention at this time. So the Councillor Steer did mention the tax deferral. So essentially that cost of deferring taxes has just become more expensive. And I know as taxes increase and services increased in cost, deferring taxes now is becoming will become more of a concern because of these changes in this budget. In addition to that, the homeowner grant for rural is going to be removed in 2027. So that's in place for 2026. So that's the additional $200 in homeowner grant that we are, homeowners are used to receiving if the property value is of a certain value. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is that the school tax rates have changed for additional school taxes. So those are on those high value properties. And we probably don't have the, actual impact of those school taxes at this budget meeting, but likely at the next with the revised rule, we can sort of go over the values of how much that additional school tax is going to impact and how many properties that would impact. And I just want to emphasize the last point, the PST on professional services.
So that's in relation to where we'll see the biggest impact is in engineering fees. And so our capital projects will be hit there. So that means more pressure on our reserve funds, more pressure on requesting grant funding. This is going to go well into the future. So fortunately, we are out of the wastewater treatment plant project and we made it through that. But we know we have a big water capital project on the horizon. And that's going to put more pressure on the provincial federal budgets and us here locally. We do outsource our engineering currently. So that contract that we have on an annual basis, that will be 7% more. And that pressure is partly directly on taxation, but partly going to hit our reserve funds. So those are just a few things I wanted to note in addition to what I was talking.
Just for clarity on that, so the homeowner grant, can you clarify that again?
Yes, so because we are a rural community, we received the regular homeowner grant of $550. And there was an additional 200, and that was attached to, I believe it was attached to climate related goals province was targeting, but I can't exactly recall the reason for that. So that was expected to be removed once that sort of fell away. That date is now 2027. So in 2026, that homeowner grant will be 770. So sorry, I think it's 570 and 200. So instead of 770, it's going to be like 2.
Okay. Save my comment. Go ahead.
Now we move into updates on operating and capital projects for second drafts, and we will start with the finance division. As an update, since November 6th, for finance division, we have only one project being added, and that is the phone system upgrades to be done this year for an estimated 17,000, which is planned to be funded by reserve for special projects. The district phone system upgrade project will replace the current system and related hardware, which the current one is reaching the end of life mid-2026 and will no longer be supported. Options are under consideration, including installing new physical hardware and controllers or transitioning to a VoIP-based system. Staff are working with a district IT service provider to assess which option best meets organizational needs, with the project scheduled for completion at the end of the third quarter. And now I would like to pass the presentation to Ms. J.D. Larson, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My presentation today will highlight the Corporate Services Division's proposed projects for the budget period, all of which fall within the emergency program. So I'll provide an overview of the key initiatives planned between 2026 and 2030, their associated budgets and funding sources, and all of these projects are designed to strengthen community resilience, enhance emergency response capacity, and ensure the district remains prepared for emerging risks. So this first slide contains a summary of the emergency program operating projects that were previously presented to council in the first draft of the budget. Since that initial presentation, there have been no changes to the project scopes, timelines, or funding sources. And with the exception of the ESS and EOC equipment and training grants or projects, which staff apply to receive annually, the projects have all been previously approved in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan. All of these are anticipated to be completed in 2026. If council has any questions on any of these, please feel free to ask, but otherwise I'll move on to our one capital project.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, through the chair. It's more just a quick comment on, I'm very supportive of the projects, of course. And just, I'm sure you may be aware of the Community Welfare Resiliency Plan with the scope within that, I believe, was conversations around the fire smart into the future. And I'm pretty sure you've probably heard the province's changes, and we may hear some different funding opportunities within that program that the province has announced. We're not sure of the clarity on that. But I think that will be an interesting piece of this puzzle in terms of moving forward. It's a critical piece of funding that have been allocated to communities, and I'm not sure where we're going to be able to sit within that. And so just a quick one on there. And then just a small one, because it's my area of work in the emergency beach markers. Do you know if there was, or are you in the process of that? And I'm just wondering, in terms of consultation with the Canadian Coast Guard, in terms of those markers, in terms of emergency services, inclusive of the Joint Rescue Community, the RCC down in Victoria, in terms of how we are allocating those for those beach markers, how we're describing them in the general sense, just so that it aligns with some of our other agencies, such as the federal government and provincial government, in terms of those markers.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Steer, through the chair. This project is really at its beginning phases, and so that's a really good note that I'll take back to our program coordinator to ensure we do consultation with the appropriate agencies. Thank you. Okay, so my division has one capital project. Again, this was previously presented to council at the first draft of the 2026 to 2030 financial plan, and also has seen no project scope changes or timeline or funding changes. This project explores the analysis and installation of a fifth tsunami siren in the downtown area to strengthen the community's emergency alerting system and provide enhanced coverage in high density areas. And so just as a bit of a summary of this one, because it has been carried forward a few times now, work that is ongoing in 2026 includes the radio analysis to ensure the most effective location, equipment purchases, installation, and then radio licensing.
If I remember correctly, some of the site locations that had been, I believe, Anchor Park may have been one of those. Is that still one of the areas that's being looked at in terms of location for number 5?
I know that they're currently, the emergency program coordinator is currently looking at a few different locations. There was one just right along here. I can't remember if it was the one like on the grassy patch near the Coast Guard, but there were some sort of licensing challenges to be able to use the space that was previously sort of planned for. And so right now the program is working on determining an appropriate location. Yeah.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing that.
Okay, so the next project I have here was previously presented to council with the first draft of the financial plan. However, there has been a proposed budget increase from $2,000 to $3,500. This project is proposed to be funded 100% through taxation. And this, as a reminder, would produce a neuro-inclusive plain language illustrated social story on tsunami safety and evacuation, aligned with all levels of tsunami guidance, and optimized for both digital access and printing. And so this would clearly walk readers through recognizing warning signs, taking immediate protective actions, and finding safe evacuation routes during emergency events. So this additional $1,500 that staff are proposing would ensure a higher quality project, and then also incorporates a modest contingency of 10%.
Councillor Steer, thank you, through the chair. I was just wondering, in terms of the social story, once again, very supportive. And I'm wondering if there's been regional conversation. I'm thinking specifically with along the peninsula with our neighbors at Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, of course, the district of Q&amp as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question, through the chair. You're going to see on one of my next slides a bit of a regional project that we're hoping the asset that comes out of this can be used for. So maybe I'll speak to that when we get there. If that's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next I am going to walk our council through some proposed projects for future years. And as we're looking at these projects, they're currently all shown as funded through taxation. So I just want to highlight that we have included them here to schedule them into the 5-year financial plan and to introduce them to council. But staff will continue to monitor any funding opportunities that become available, particularly provincial and federal granting opportunities. And we will reassess the project timings and feasibility as they come forward in the financial plan. So just to highlight that there. So the first project that we're proposing for 2027 is the Hazard Risk Vulnerability Assessment Mapping Project. And this would update the community's outdated HRVA, as we call it, which was last completed in 2009, which did receive a coastal flooding update in 2019 to align with the new Emergency and Disaster Management Act, which was received for royal assent in 2023. So it incorporates climate-related hazards and provides evidence-based data to guide mitigation, land use planning, and preparedness. The second project that we're proposing is what we were referring to at the last slide, Councillor Steer. This is a regional map of high ground muster points and evacuation routes that would include locations throughout the Tofino, Pacific Rim National Park, and Ucluelet corridor. So this project is proposed for 2027, and it would develop the unified regional scale map showing all of those muster points and evacuation routes for residents and visitors traveling throughout that corridor. That budget amount is primarily for design work for the map asset as well as printing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this may be one of those opportunities. Anytime I see 100% taxation funded, these are all incredibly worthy projects, but with pressures on our budget, this may be one where there's opportunity with our regional partners. Certainly, I think of the ACRD and with our national park to be able to coordinate some funding potentials there. This is one of those projects that stands out to me in those regional contexts where we have a body there that may be an appropriate sourced area to have that regional conversation rather than relying solely on the District of Tofino in these circumstances.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, thank you for that note. I know Tofino has sort of taken the lead on this project, so that's that's a good consideration in terms of funding it. And then the last project proposed for 2027 is the EOC operational plan. And so this project would create an updated emergency operations center management plan with clear HR processes, call-in procedures, and defined operational roles, which would address some of the recommendations that came out of the recently adopted emergency communications plan that was approved in 2025 to strengthen EOC activation and management. I'll pause there in case there's any questions about any of these projects.
Yeah.
So in 2028, staff are proposing 2 projects within the corporate services division. One is updating the emergency response plan, and the second is rewriting the emergency program bylaw. So the emergency response plan update will modernize and consolidate the district's 2012 emergency response plan to meet the new provincial standards and current science. Updating the plan every 5 years is industry standard and best practice, and so we are a bit out of date on that process. And so this project is budgeted to require consultant fees, technical data, hazard-specific engagement, and the budget is sort of consistent with recent projects that we've had of this scope.
Councillor Steer.
Just a quick question, Jamie. Some of this is legislatively required, though, isn't it? We have to do what we have to do.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So the new provincial emergency legislation that came into effect in 2023 came into effect, and we've been sort of waiting for the province to come out with the regulations, clarity on the regulations, and they haven't come out yet. And so while this is outdated, we've been sort of holding off to see those regulations come through so that we can be effective when we do make whatever changes are required in our plans and bylaws. But we don't want to hold off forever. And so we've scheduled it into 2028, hoping that by then we have some sort of clear guidance on the regulations that we can use to incorporate within those.
For almost all municipalities and local governments are saying that thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. The second project is a rewrite of the emergency program bylaw. And this project will rewrite the 2018 emergency program bylaw to align again with the current provincial legislation, best practices, and the district's organizational structure. So in 2022, the district had a large organizational restructure that is not currently reflected in our emergency program bylaw. And this budget, again, is primarily expected to incur consultant costs. So moving on to 2029, staff are proposing 2 projects to strengthen the district's ability to maintain essential services, leadership, and recovery capacity during major emergency events. So the first project is the Business Continuity and Governance Succession Plan. This project would develop a formal framework to ensure essential services and leadership continuity during emergencies, supporting legislative compliance, EOC operations, and stable governance. The second proposed project for 2029 is the Community Recovery Plan. So this would take some of the data and process that we currently have as a single-page version that lives within our Emergency Response and Recovery Plan from 2022 and would create a comprehensive standalone community recovery document, a plan. And so this would clearly define the roles, the resources, and priorities for social, economic, and infrastructure recovery and reduce long-term post-disaster impacts.
Mr. Steer.
Thank you, through the chair. This is one where through the wildfire incidents we've had throughout the province, the coastal flood or the flooding incidents we've had throughout the province, this has become clear to me that the recovery plan and the business continuity has become essential. And I'm looking, noting the time frame in terms of budget or 100% taxation, but 2029. It is something that has become clear to me is imperative for the continuation post disaster for communities. And I'm wondering maybe in later conversations about where we might place that in the budget cycle, something that we may, as a council, revisit later, because it is, I believe, a critical piece of the puzzle that I know we have in place certain documentation, but as changes to the Act and other areas, we may want to look a little more closely at this in terms of Tofino's ability to recover such a potential event.
Thank you, through the chair. That's a really good note, so I appreciate that. As we are sort of adopting this financial plan and looking at future years, we can definitely prioritize or shift priorities based on some of these proposed projects. Because we are catching up a little bit with the provincial legislation and with sort of staff capacity, our strategy was to prioritize 1 or maybe 2 large projects per year. And so the HRVA schedule for 2027 will be a really critical document for just gathering all of the sort of processes and the data that we need to inform the rest of the plans. And then I would say after that one, there is definitely some flexibility with moving projects around as council would like to prioritize.
Thank you. I know you guys have thought this well out in terms of the order of how you would like to approach it. Just seeing these areas, they're all high priority, as I'm sure you're trying to fit it into an appropriate work plan. So thank you.
Thank you. No further questions on this slide. I'll move on to 2030. So this is my final project slide, and it outlines 3 projects proposed for 2030. The first one is the Climate Adaptation Plan, and this would develop a long-term plan to address climate-related risks and strengthen community resilience, aligning with provincial legislation and with council's climate and sustainability priorities. And then we have 2 more projects that are scheduled for 2030. These are updates to both the emergency program strategic plan and the emergency notification and communications plan, which were both completed in 2025. And so per industry best standard, we're seeing them again here in 2030 for review and updates as required.
I just got a bit of a geek note throughout there. I know that these plans and projects, some of the aspects of these are ripe for cost reduction due to advances in modeling and information generation. So I think this, potentially in the next couple of years, we'll see these kind of projects decrease substantially in cost, or at least for a part of it. So that's encouraging.
Oh, lastly, just to highlight all of the caretaker projects that have been previously approved in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan. And so all of these projects are being carried forward into 2026, or the draft 2026 to 2030 financial plan, and are expected to be completed in 2026. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions, and if there are none, then I will pass things over to Aaron Rodgers.
See none, go ahead. Councillor McMaster.
I have no questions.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Today I'm going to present the Community Services Division in the same format as Mrs. Lars's presentation. And I'll go through it fairly slowly and I'll take any questions or comments from Mayor and Council. So we'll start in our project summary, the ones that are not being changed. That being said, I've received some very late notice that 2026 roadmap for the biodiversity. We're looking to fund that through potentially Q&amp and grant funds. So that may be updated for the third reading of the budget. So it's obviously a large taxation amount. It's that project that's going to help us tie everything together for the next OCP to protect the environment, linking together like the ESA, current OCP. So it's a big project, but maybe just stay tuned for that one. The coastal floodplain bylaw update, I understand, is actually supposed to be in corporate services. And this is the update of the existing bylaw that allows, that spoke to a height above a future of coastal flood, but not depth into a property. So I'll reconnect with Ms. Larson about that one in future for third budget meeting. The dark skies policy and the tree protection bylaw. We think, based on our water situation and planning, that we may be able to bring those in-house. And so again, at the third reading of at the third budget meeting, you may see an update in this as well.
Maybe you're going to do this next slide, Mr. Rodgers, but what would be the aggregate taxation decrease if all of those things happen?
That's a good point. Let's have to my head here, 95, 100, 111,500.
That would be the decrease if all of those things were.
Yeah, the coastal floodplain bylaw update might just move over, so it may also say 100,000. That might just move divisions. But like it's possible that if we bring the third and fourth one into half, and if we manage to get LDCAP and grants for the roadmap, then we'll get about $100,000.
Okay.
I would say too that something I've been thinking a lot about. Obviously this is you're already month 2 of the year. We've got some big projects on the go for council, like a half and potentially the library project and some others. So it's gonna be a busy year as it is.
Yeah, maybe just if you go back, Mr. Rodgers, and I was just curious on the roadmap for biodiversity. It sounds like some good news, potentially grant funded,
Yes.
Which is excellent. And I know too. One of the main objectives of that is to identify the strategies for achieving the vision. Is that correct? Is that what we're looking for primarily within the scope of that plan?
Yeah, perhaps like if the council is amiable, I could just read out the project sheet description here.
Yeah,
I don't have it here.
Yeah.
And I can read out to the broader group. The 2030 roadmap for biodiversity protection and enhancement project is intended to define a vision for forests, wetlands, and riparian areas in the DOT boundaries to help the municipality meet the United Nations 30 by 30 initiative, which is part of also one of our zoning projects, and establish a set of strategies to ensure long-term biodiversity protection enhancement. It's going to build off the ESA report that we did in 2024 and set priorities, goals, and strategies to achieve this vision. And so that we can, in the future, use this as our base level planning tool for future project programs like the OCP, which talks about the community is big. So let's figure out where the forests and the wetlands are, let's figure out how they work together. And let's plan our population centers outside of those areas or potentially with more density or whatever other tools that we have.
Yeah, thank you. And this has been a key objective of this council, right in the beginning of our strategic planning process. So I'm really glad to see this here in 2026, better late than never. And I recognize the comprehensiveness of this, and it'll inform many of the things that you're just including OCP, any of our bylaw review. There's a whole number of components in here. So thank you for getting it up onto the schedule.
The planning team.
Yes. Well, I know. Yeah.
The 2026 zoning bylaw, there'll be some work on this that may tie into the project we were just talking about. As we try to move through some of the list. We won't get through it in 2026, but we hope to get a start on it. The rest are projects that will come year after 2026 and 2027. That includes amenity cost charge bylaw. So the province has given us new powers to develop amenity cost charge bylaw. Currently, we have a policy in place, so potentially moving that to more of a formal document. The foreshore tenure application policy, I think for council's information, it's the policy that we would use or council may use when we're looking at when someone's coming forward to maybe put a wedding on the beach or add lawn chairs. We'd have some kind of framework around how to make those decisions. 2027 Regional Climate Planning Initiative is a project we're working with CBT on, and that's a sort of big planning project for the region that was followed by significant capital dollars. And so that will tie into the more regional project. Our share would be around $70,000. And again, it's all grant funded. And then DO 117 sponsored Crown grant. That's the grant. That's the project we have to deal with because we have DO 17 that's which said it's for watershed purposes only, and we built a trail on it and a wastewater treatment plant, water tower, and so we need to fix that. And so that's planned for this year. In terms of fire, we have a project in 2028 for auto excavation. That project will likely line up with the purchase and fit out of a new rescue truck. Usually those things go together, so the tools go in the trucks and they tend to want to go together. The truck will come out of a C&I levy as well.
Yeah, and just Aaron, just so I understand, it's also for that auto extrication tool. It is reaching end of life, and you're just kind of aligning it with the purchase of the new vehicle.
Exactly. The auto X tools that we have now are end of life. We replaced the fire department has replaced the pump last year with some new hoses. So they're quite expensive. It's likely that the new tools would be battery operated. They're much more powerful. We had to replace, I believe, the cutters last year as well. So they've been around as long as that truck's been around, which I think has been on 25 years. So the idea would be to use the C&I levy and the development of a purchase of a new truck and build it all together. So we have a couple of change plans. Looking after the first meeting, we went back and looked at our schedules for the year, looked at what we were looking for in terms of taxation, and have moved back the cemetery master plan by 1 year and the OCP plan update by a couple of years. And then again, that is OCP update will build off of the plan we talked about on the first slide, potentially that regional climate planning as well. So we have some zoning to do first, and getting the zoning done, I think is critical, and then the OCP update. So the OCP update will be moved back.
Through the chair. Thank you. Yeah, Eric, Mr. Rogers, the cemetery master plan, I just wanted to, there's a group of locals that have approached me, and you and I have had conversations in the past. And within that master plan, we'll be looking at things like green burial, some of the conversations that I've been having with some community. We've got a volunteer group who's really willing to work with the district on this. They've been very clear to me that they're really wanting to be involved in those conversations. So when that opportunity comes up, maybe I can reach out to staff with that group that is very keen on being involved.
That sounds great. Even though it says 2027, I'm actually working on it in 2026 to try to do a lot of the writing, get the frameworks ready to go and be able to plug and play in 2027, so we don't have to wait forever. I have an email actually in my inbox I reached out to a number of companies in 2025 asking for some quotes on what it would cost us to determine what's in the ground, like what's the salinity, how deep is the water table, is the soil suitable for green barley, all of those things. And so I've just received an email back, so I'll be communicating with them. So when I do come to council in 27, I'll have a pretty clear idea of what it's going to cost us, and the main amount of these funds is going to be the environmental report to make sure that what we think we want to do there can be achieved to that standard now, but also it's really essentially it's an asset management plan. How much land do we have to keep the people of Tofino, safe and secure for eternity? Thank you. We've removed a couple of projects, mobile population census and the aquatic feasibility study. We've added a new project that will go over 26 and 27, which is essentially a master plan for the fire department. We think we can do most of this in-house as well between myself and the chief of the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department. This will give us an idea of what the next 28 years looks like in terms of tools, in terms of trucks, in terms of buildings, in terms of staffing and levels of service. Right now, the only tool that we really have is a 5-year financial plan and the C&I levy. And we would like to put a little bit of thought around that and make sure we have a plan that we can present to council and stand behind in front of the community about what we want to do with that department, or what the department's going to do to meet the growth that Tofino may or may not have.
Just to go back there, just to the removal of the aquatic feasibility study. I know that the open house, there was quite a few people that have that top of the list, and maybe just a little comment on that. I understand the recreation master plan will include maybe just a comment on that, so that they don't think that this has just been abandoned on them.
I may also comment quickly and then pass it over to Diana. The recreation master plan is going to be coming forward to council, I believe, I think it's beginning of March, for the final draft for council to have a review before we finalize it. One of the projects is aquatic feasibility study, or the idea of an aquatics. What does that look like for Tofino? And so I think that's going to be a great time for council to be able to weigh in and discuss that. It's similarly, the sports court lighting was one of the other projects that we just are holding back on until we get this rec master plan in front of council. So apologies for the delay in that. It should have been out. We were aiming for the end of last year, but we're obviously quarter of the way into this year. But hopefully that will provide some additional information for council about that. Apologies for skipping over that. It was in my head, but I forgot it until the next.
It's all right.
The commercial real estate strategy. This is a new project plan for 2027. This is essentially an asset management plan for our land holdings in the District of Tofino and how we may want to consider buying, selling, or developing those projects over the year. It's something we obviously know. We have the lot behind us and the lot next to us, and we have District 1.7. We own a significant amount of property. We don't really have a plan to develop those or to sell them or to land bank. There's just nothing at this point. So when we get a project, where should this go? We would like to be able to look forward 5 or 10 years and have a strategy so that if Mr. Kirkland knows that he's got a new water, he needs a new water that we know where it's going to go. And if it's somewhere that we don't own, then how do we obtain that piece of property and how do we protect the district in that way? So it's not just about investment and making money. It's also about strategic decisions for the infrastructure group, primarily about what we might need into the future.
This couldn't come sooner. Councillor Steer.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious, Mr. Rogers, in terms of a projected budget of $25,000, what is incurred in that $25,000?
It's a great question. This project, we're likely working with one of our consultants, Cindy Nesselbeck. And it's based, the project would likely be based off the Nanaimo commercial real estate study. They did one a couple of years ago. And what that does is we're going to see what we have, and that's the cheap part of the project. We're going to be able to use our GIS data that we've collected over the years. So we'll know what we have. We'll have assessment data. Then we'll basically, it's the work of taking that and lining it up with the 5-year financial plan or any of Public Works's and Infrastructure's 20-year plans or their AM plans, understanding where those things may be. And then there's going to probably the bulk of that money is going to come into a financial analysis of how we do this, because that's the part of that we don't have that necessarily that expertise within the district. That is sort of the planning of it. So I think $25,000 will do it. I will come back to council next year with a better idea, but I have this when I've been working with a consultant. That's a number we've kind of settled on. I don't want to go too far with this project either because it's kind of new for us. I want to get our step in, get it in, get it set up, and then as we move forward over the next like 5 or 10 years, be able to build it out a little bit.
I have to comment on this one. I know that the ACRD and many other municipalities are also doing this. So I think this is really quite cutting edge, and I know it's top of mind. I don't know if it would be cheaper or any beneficial at all to partner. Probably not, but it's a good idea to know that there's a lot of communities that are doing this.
It's actually really great to know because, you know, as if there are a community, we may be able to save money on RFPs, approaches, potentially come together on some consulting. You know, if we build we know what the template is, it saves us time, which is.
Yeah, I think that was my comment. Yeah, might say or get a better product.
Yeah.
And just another question on that, would that be a policy? Would it be a bylaw? Would it just be, where would it sit in the hierarchy of?
It's likely to be a master plan. It's in that master plan type of area. So like we have the water master plan, the sanitary master plan, the storm master plan. This is essentially going to be a land master plan for the District of Tofino as outside of facilities.
Gotcha. Great, thanks.
And we have a couple of carryover projects. I think we're all aware that the community hall kitchen is well underway and expecting that to be completed next month in March. The fire hall replacements project will be only move forward if we receive grant funding because of the strike last year with the province. That's delayed communication between us and the province. So the last time that Mr. Kirkland contacted them, they were looking at the summertime for to hear back whether our grant was successful. So we can keep our fingers crossed about that one. And then the Housing Accelerator Fund project is continuing on. We have some pretty aggressive targets for 2026. We've completed most of our milestones. We're into the last 4 or 5. We expect that we'll get the 3rd installment of funding and potentially the 4th installment of funding, subject to work on 740 Campbell. But I'm actually quite excited. The planning team, and especially with the Welsh, have prioritized this and doing very, very quickly on it. We're closely connected with the federal government, the funders, as well as the Tofino Housing Corporation, and combine those two. So this may turn out to be a big win for us by the end of the year. And there it is.
Oh yeah, we're gonna find public.
Thank you.
Ron? Okay. To the mayor and council. So I'll be presenting infrastructure and public works division, capital projects. So project summary of no change projects. So the public works fire building fire blocking project upgrades the north wall of the public works building that's adjacent to the YSAR building. So that brings the building up to BC building code requirements for fire separation, since those two buildings are so close together. No change on that one. Funded from the CNI levy for buildings and structures. Odor control media replacement will replace the scrubber media in the biosolids bin room, odor control unit, and at the Warren Way lift station. So this one is a part of the preventative maintenance and asset management programming. We will be changing some of the media compounds because we have found higher levels of ammonia and volatile organic compounds at those two locations. And then kind of looking forward, Main Street and the headworks part of the wastewater treatment plant will be the next 2 units change out. There's 4 total odor control units. So here's camera upgrades. So change to the budget as we just finalized what the actual budget was to replace the cameras. This will install new cameras that are more weather resistant, and also the associated electrical infrastructure, just to alleviate the seasonal challenges that staff have. Multi-generator will utilize an existing district-owned generator. There's been some optimizations to the project budget, so it'll be an existing generator that the district already owns, and then materials and labor to install it on site. And then staff won't have to tow a trailer generator out to multi-road every time there's a power outage. The Third Street Park renewal, so no change there. This year staff will work with Tla-o-qui-aht and the project team to plan and design what enhancements will happen to the Third Street Park. Public Works covered storage, the Village Green gazebo replacement. This year we'll look at the same thing, kind of a design and an overall assessment of that location. There's some stormwater improvements that need to happen at the Village Green. There's no change to the budget. That one's fully funded by RMI. There'll be discussions with the community about what to do with the existing gazebo, which was built by a lot of hard work by volunteers, as I understand. So just trying to make sure whatever decisions are made respect the history of what that existing gazebo is. Public Works covered storage. This is part and parcel with the fire hall replacement. So a fire hall replacement project goes, the covered storage part goes for Public Works. This would move a kind of like a Quonset sort of style hut on top of sea containers to allow for more for covered storage for heavy equipment and some of the potential lost spaces in the Public Works yard right now as a result of the fire hall building. This project's proposed to be funded from CNI levy buildings category. The fleet replacement project, so this the value listed there is spread out over the 5-year period identified, 2026 to 2030. This year we'll be replacing the utilities water truck. So historically called the water truck, it does service both sewer and water infrastructure. It's got a crane on it, so staff use that to lift pumps out of wet wells and so forth. That is at the end of its service life. There's challenges with that vehicle. The annual maintenance costs have gone up, so it's deemed to be replacement by the fleet asset management plan, and will also be replacing the parks vehicle just to have a larger vehicle that's more practical to the day-to-day operations. And then the other one to highlight, as Mr. Rogers had brought up, Rescue 5, which is the rescue response vehicle that the fire department owns, that is slated for 2028 replacement. We can pause on the fleet one if there are any questions.
I think you answered them, so thank you.
The next one, is slated for 2027 is the Gibson Street design. There's no change right now. As staff, later in the slides, I will show a transportation infrastructure master plan. So there may be changes in the future. This would be informed through the master planning process.
Chair, yeah, just a quick question. As you know, there's a number of correspondence, and I'm just wondering, within this Gibson Street design, I see a 2027 timeframe, and I know that there's been some conversations about one end of Gibson Street, and I'm wondering, in this Gibson Street design, if there were a number of suggestions through correspondence, and I know with direct meetings. Is the design project here inclusive of that particular concern that's been expressed by members of the community, or is this something separate?
Through the chair, this design focuses on that area. That is the topic of that discussion.
Right, and I'm just wondering, as it will, it's going to come up in the very near future. There may be some conversations around what can be done in a temporary format. And I just want to make sure that temporary kind of conversation may be help to inform that Gibson Street design. It's going to be coming up tomorrow, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Yeah. Through the chair, absolutely. Okay, so continuing on project summary for no changes. So we have pipeline inspection equipment. This one, there's no changes to it, but just to reiterate, it's for staff completing internal condition assessments internally without having to rely on consultants. Will help determine where, if there's blockages, where blockages are located, whether they're on private side of services or on district side of services. Like Bars Mountain tank replacement is carrying on. It's a water master plan identified capital project, would replace the old tank at Bars Mountain, which is at the end of its serviceable life. And then moving into 2028, the Close Creek infiltration gallery renewal. So over on Mears Island, this would be digging up the underground infiltration gallery, replacing the perforated pipe, putting in new filter fabric, and putting in new clear free drain material.
And through the chair, just a quick question, just my own interest in the tank replacement. Is there an increase with the replacement? Will it be an increased capacity within that tank or similar sized to that infrastructure?
Through the chair, it would increase capacity. It wouldn't be a significant increase in capacity, but it would match the size of the other tank that's up there right now. So a 25% increase in capacity, roughly.
Sure. Thank you.
Moving on, so we have some changes here. So Campbell Street Phase 3, there's been some, as funding sources have been realized and designs been finalized, there's an increase to Campbell Street Phase 3. This is based on the full design estimate, working with finance to determine proposed funding. The majority of it is being funded through RMI. There is some funding through the Campbell Street Restricted Reserve, the Paid Parking Reserve, Parks and Rec C&I levy, Roads and Sidewalks C&I levy, parking lots C&I levy. So there's a lot of funding sources and a lot of hard work and collaboration between the capital delivery folks and the finance team to get to where we are with funding. An update on this one, permitting is currently being finalized with the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. They're happy with what the design is showing. Staff are planning to have an open house on March 12th. So we'll have more to come with invitations on that in the near term. And the goal on our milestone, so the first big milestone goal, pending feedback on the project, is to get this out for tender in May and look at kind of phasing the construction towards the end of this year and early next year.
You don't want to do it.
It's a lot of intricacies there, yeah.
Excellent.
I'll pause on that one just in case there's any questions or comments.
An excellent project. It's just timing and inconvenience.
Yes.
Short term or long.
Yeah, certainly a very, when it goes, very fun project to find ways to complete it without big delays or impacts to the community, and then when it is, it's a focal centerpiece to that area of town. The next one listed here is, and for this year, is the Main Street water main replacement and capacity upgrade. So this year focuses, is the first phase is between 4th Street and 3rd Street. This will increase the diameter when the water main is replaced to allow fire flows to be met, especially down at between 3rd and 4th Street with some of the more industrial sort of style users with the harbor there and the fish processing facility. So yeah, this one, as I said, upgrades the size of the water main, and it also replaces a lot of service connections, specifically that stretch between 3rd and 4th Street. Staff on a yearly basis are always replacing service connections. We do anticipate there to be a quantity of water that we could recover from non-revenue loss through there. So there will be more to come as we accurately quantify what that number is, and staff will come back to council. Slight increase on budget just as designs were finalized.
Sure, and once again, Simon, this particular project has the potential for disruption. Do you have, in terms of this project, time frame, time of year, and I'm sure you've thought well through the mitigating factors for disruption to that section of Main Street? There are a number of businesses as well as federal government installations there as well. So I'm sure you have, but is there a projected time for the work to commence on that one?
Yeah, through the chair, where staff are anticipating to commence and complete this project ahead of the busy months. So over the next couple months, it is out for tender right now. And then staff, kind of to speak to the harbor area, staff have been in communications with some of the partners at that location, so we can work together to mitigate, or where we can't mitigate, make sure that impacts are communicated ahead of time.
Just a question on this one. Is there going to be any surface changes to the parking layouts or the sidewalks or anything like that on the one side of it? Is this dovetailed into anything, any improvements on that, or is it just a replacement part?
Through the chair, it is just a replacement of the water main. However, it would indirectly dovetail into future improvements with Main Street, as we want to replace our water and sewer, like all our underground infrastructure, before completing above ground public realm improvements.
That's a good plan.
Pick it up again.
It's great. Great, just one.
I can pause if there's any other questions or comments. So 2 projects that have been removed at this time. So Village Green pathway upgrades we have removed for the time being, and kind of speaking to the last question that came up, there are drainage improvement opportunities at the Village Green that staff want to focus on this year to get up to speed with before we start doing the above ground public realm improvements to the park. Also in the interim, this value for this project helps support funding for the Campbell Street Phase 3 project, which is ready for public realm improvements. And then, as Mr. Rogers indicated earlier, we have removed the Village Green sport court lighting for the time being. One, for the Parks and Rec master plan to be finalized, and then to allow staff more time to do consultation with the public and really refine what that scope of work goes to, wants or doesn't want to be. Okay, so fun stuff, getting into some new projects here. So a new one funded by RMI is gender neutral washroom retrofit. So this would retrofit the South Chesterman Beach washrooms and the 1431, or the kind of the Cox Bay Boardwalk access washroom, to be gender neutral or all inclusive for all. And I believe that would generally make all the district washrooms, albeit maybe some of the facilities, but all of the outdoor ones generally gender neutral. Headworks platform additions, so this one is at the wastewater plant in the Headworks building. This was identified by operations staff as an investment to help put in some additional walkways around the screens at the wastewater treatment plant. Staff completed successfully at the end of last year. Kudos to the team because that was a big activity, but replaced the brushes on the screens, which brush all of the rags and the solids off of the incoming raw sewage into bins down below. So through reflection and kind of debriefs on that, staff would like to have a little bit more access around to the backside of the screens. This project would be funded through the C&I levy sewer, and is testament to the asset management program and identifying various needs from a preventative lens rather than reactive. If there's any questions or comments.
Just through the chair, just a quick comment, you know, the new plant, the operations, we are going to be discovering those efficiencies that, and I'm glad to hear staff his input is being taken and it's reflected in the potential budget conversation. So that's wonderful. And I think it shows that we have a staff that can identify those efficiencies within a new, very expensive wastewater treatment plant and find those efficiencies within there. So thank you to staff.
Thank you through the chair. The next new project is a new pump at the Bay Street pumping station location. So in the interim of some of the larger decisions that need to be made with the district's water infrastructure, this would aim to add a third pump to the Bay Street pumping station at sustainable investment amount without going through like a full facility replacement until we kind of refine where we're looking at in the long term with the district's water system. Currently, right now, there's two pumps down there. In the summertime or the busier seasons, parts of the year, those pumps are often running at the same time, which means that if one of those pumps ever went down, it would be very challenging to meet the demand at that location. So common industry practices to have critical equipment running as 2 duty and 1 standby. So this would allow less hours or on each pump, and then in the event one went down, we would have full redundancy to that system. And fully funded through the C&I levy.
Sure. Yeah, thank you through the chair. This was one that I did, you know, with the question, I think you alluded to it in terms of our investment in we have a water master plan that's identified a number of potential or in the longer term and balancing how much we're going to be investing in the short to medium term in these types of infrastructure upgrades, or to a certain degree, in this case, redundancy for our systems. I'm sure you've weighed those in terms of the importance of that. It's going to come up, I think, in the next few years in terms of those, how much we're going to invest in the present system if we are, in fact, going to make any major changes into our water infrastructure project. So I'm sure you thought this one well out, and this is something that obviously you've identified as critical to the operations in the potentially maybe short, medium, and long term. So thank you for identifying that. It's just something that keeps me thinking about how much money in our present budget is going to go into work that may or may not be used.
Yeah, through the chair, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Very challenging decisions and important decisions to make. So the next one foreshadowed a little bit earlier. So transportation, following suit with what staff have done over the last few years, water master plan, sanitary sewer master plan, stormwater master plan is having a transportation infrastructure master plan. This one kind of will build on a lot of the work done previously with the multimodal transportation plan and build out a longer term capital investment plan for our transportation, the district's transportation infrastructure, as well as do condition assessment, help staff prioritize different maintenance activities and overall evaluation of what transportation infrastructure the district owns. Fully funded from the C&I levy on this one as well.
That's just through the chair, and once again, this is for my own. In terms of the prioritization, I think of Neil Street, for example, where the section between Third and Fourth, where there is no sidewalking on Neil there, is the prioritization component inclusive of in this? Just, you know where I'm going with that, because there's a number of projects throughout the community, of course, and certainly community members bring it to our attention.
Yeah.
Would that be embedded, those kinds of prioritizations of those types of, in this case, I'm thinking sidewalk?
Yeah.
Is that embedded into this potential infrastructure master plan?
Thank you. It's a great question. Through the chair, yes, it would, absolutely. The capital prioritization is gonna look at assets from a renewal profile and through an acquisition sort of profile as well to prioritize, where the most important ones, like what's most important. And that one at Neil Street would be an acquisition for sure. And but yeah, it's good. It's going to look at all sorts of things without try to hold back a little bit.
Thank you.
If that does answer.
It does, yeah. I was just curious because it's going to obviously be, community members throughout the district are going to have prioritizations of their role.
Yeah.
So I often wonder how much of that is informed by community input in terms of the work that gets done. So I think that will probably come up within the infrastructure master plan. So.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, somewhat different than a water and a sewer thing where there's, okay, these are things that we just have to, we have to do these. And I think with the transportation infrastructure plan, that's great feedback because there is probably more level of community engagement in it compared to a sewer and a water master plan as well. And I think, staff, they're very important things to consider as well. Building on renewals from transportation infrastructure. So this one, we're all in infrastructure and public works, particularly on the public works side of things. Quite proud of where we've come on this, and this is a big testament to the asset management program and actually quantifying how much infrastructure or like what the assets are that the district has and getting robust condition assessments completed on everything. So the value on this is built out over a 5-year period. Average is somewhere around $50,000 of investment into renewals a year. So this is not acquiring new sidewalk spaces or locations. And for this year, we'll just be continuing the work in front of the hospital. So the sidewalks kind of up and down and pulling people, users off to the side. Yeah. Any questions on this one?
Councilwoman.
Is this a project that you can see continuing past 2030, like always kind of being a budget?
Yeah, it's a great question through the chair. And I was actually thinking about this one in particular before I came up, and I think of this more as a program. So yes, it's a project sheet and it is a project per se, but this is something that would continue on a year-by-year basis to varying degrees, but into perpetuity.
It's part of the asset management program. So perhaps as that gets established, then all of these things, like sidewalks, lighting, they'll all be rolled up into asset management. That's my understanding.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. And informed by the transportation infrastructure master plan will help provide some good insights onto it as well. Keep moving on. So Sharp Dam rehabilitation project. So kind of similar to what we're doing at the Bay Street pumping station. I think the community or like the district's known for a very long time that there's some rehab or retrofitting that needs to be done to the Sharp Creek Dam. There is some obvious seismic upgrades that would be a much more significant capital, like financial investment. But until, there's more clarity on what the future of the water system is, staff believe this is a sustainable investment. We will have a contractor come in, go with some waterproofing cement, like a Zytex is a product that can be used, and that will at least cover the reinforcing steel that's exposed on that dam to protect it from further degradation. It is a bit challenging just to get in there because you are at the bottom of a dam, which is in a riverway, so there is some mobilization and scaffolding set up that do make up quite a bit of that $45,000 budget. To just do some patching, yeah. Is any questions? Okay, and the Vancouver Island Library project. So this is a project that staff are working on to develop a new library, which would include staff office spaces and shared spaces for the library and the public. We're working through conversations and updating a memorandum of understanding with the Vancouver Island regional library staff at this time. I'll speak kind of more from the capital project side, and then if there's anything I'm missing, I'll look to Ms. Atiana and Mr. Rogers to fill in. But the idea is to engage with an architect in the near term, work through with the budget that we have, building a design, getting a contractor involved for early contractor engagement to help inform what the budget is and the constructability components of the project. The idea is to add RMI as we go into the third version of the financial plan to have an outdoor coverage share space. So have RMI support funding that. And yeah, it's generally what it is. Staff, there's been a lot of work put into the funding sources here and the various models. So I'll pause maybe there and look around the room.
I guess I don't have to stick my hand up, but I do know that I've heard that the co-op board is looking for community investments, substantial amount. So, and I've heard that they're interested in community organizations like the district, approaching them to see if they'd be interested in partnering or contributing to a large project that was focused on community members, residents, kids. So this might be a good email to send. If, more funding help to reduce DCCs or parking or whatever, or debt.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll look around. I don't know if there's anything else that would be I missed at this time. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. And then we've got a list of carryover projects, which I will move through here. So multi-use pathway upgrades, that is actually coming to council tomorrow night for a tender award. So that one we should see completed before the busy season, which does enhance or renew a high use section of the multi-use path. 4th Street washroom tender documents are actually being prepared this week, so that should be going out in the next week or so. Olson Road storm main, staff have had some good conversation with the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. We've finalized what the funding partnerships will look like with the province on that one, and we're looking to tendering this in the next month or two as well. There is an archaeological permit that we're just waiting to have reissued, but staff are also working closely with Tla-o-qui-aht on this one as well, in the Tribal Guardians program, for how we can monitor during construction, because there is definitely archaeological risk on that project. So nice to see this one move forward this year. Community and supporting the CPT development there as well. Tonquin Trail improvements. So staff have actually internally done a lot of work at the Tonquin Bridge. So I encourage anyone to take a look at that. Fantastic job internally. This project will help with putting some new material and addressing drainage issues along the Tonquin Trail corridor. South Tofino Force Main project, still in the phase of, and part and parcel of the sanitary master plan, kind of refining what that design scope really wants to be. So there's historically been the idea of twinning the entire force main between Maltby and Lynn Road, which would be a very challenging, logistically challenging project to complete. So really pressing that to see if there is potentially another way of addressing the capacity challenges there. So yeah, there's going to be some more to come on that pretty quickly here. Close Creek valve replacement project. So this one, staff have a final design on this. This would kind of where the bypass valve gets installed and where all the 3 water sources or 4 water sources at that size of Mears Island meet before they're conveyed to Bay Street. This would renew that valve chamber. So there's leaky valves in that location and yeah, big asset renewal project, and then formalize that bypass. Put some extra flow meters on there so we can track what volumes are coming from what locations. First Street dock improvements is kind of similar to the sidewalk renewal thing. It's more like a program. So the dock is First Street Wharf dock is an asset with many components to it that all need to be renewed or replaced at different times. So this builds in a program. This year is just focusing on getting a contractor in to build off the condition assessment that was completed in 2021 and kind of look at it from a constructability lens and of how we can start to, or staff can start to execute a program here. And then fleet replacements, already touched on it earlier, but it's the same thing, continue to carry. I think that might be all I have. Is there any questions before I?
Just a question. It's a little bit off topic, but it's kind of on topic, and it's about the importance of monitoring and upgrading the system for data and information for water monitoring, especially. And I know that it's one of the key components of our system that makes it so efficient, and it makes it able for staff to not only monitor it, but to fix leaks and assess the high risk areas. Could you just do a quick comment for me just on how important water monitoring is for this?
For the chair, it's extremely important that this carries on no matter who the staff are. Like it's an extremely important thing for the district to do, both on getting data on what is changing on a year-over-year basis with how the streams actually react to different conditions of climate or climate change. And then just maintaining our existing infrastructure. So we know we have flow meters here that are working well. We know that we're exercising our valves so they're not leaking, and just the leak detection work that goes on both from an internal, like what our utility operations staff do with the actual leak detection equipment and going around and listening for leaks, and then what we're really starting this year with supporting like the private user community with water use audits and just helping support the community in finding ways to alleviate their water use in their day-to-day operations. There's a lot more than what I just said there. But
My background for that is I know a lot of other communities that are struggling with water issues are trying to implement water monitoring, and they're having significant issues. And I just love to hear that it's such an exceptional and key part of our program that it benefits everybody. It benefits the residents, it benefits the town, all the businesses. So without that, I think it would be almost impossible to have a efficient, effective water system. Thank you for that. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, and just to build on Mayor Law, because tomorrow's council meeting, there will be a presentation on the short list of alternate supplemental sources. And I think this is bringing this up now is key, because some of the potential choices we have are dependent upon that kind of monitoring, so we have a better understanding, because there's some potentially huge potential infrastructure projects. And we already have a system in place here, and if we can build on it at a lesser cost, and we have much more robust data to help us inform council about the decisions we may have to make in short, medium, and long term.
Councillor McMaster.
Yeah, just going back to the library for a second. I'm aware of the co-op being a potential benefactor, but also when we looked at the library many years ago, there was a number of, for want of a better word, wealthy individuals within the community who perhaps don't live here all the time, said that they'd be prepared to contribute towards a library if it was actually going to happen. So I'd like to see if staff could come up with some scheme where we set up a, Friends of the Library Society or something like that, so people could make a donation and perhaps get a tax receipt to the building of a new library. That's all.
Thank you. Maybe I'll look to Ms. Tatiana for comment on that.
Sure, thank you through the chair. There are some municipalities that have foundations set up, and it is on our to-do list to do some research around that for potential donations that could support projects. So that just moved a little further up on our list, and we'll take that away, see if we can come back with something.
Thanks, Councilor McMaster. Councilor Steer.
I have to step out just for 1 minute,
Okay.
but you don't need to interrupt the presentation. That's, be right
1,
back.
2, 4, yes. Councilor, Ms. Tatiana.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Law, staff need to respectfully request a 10-minute recess because we need to make an adjustment to the presentation.
Okay. Let's do it. I'll take a recess, reconvene at 10:55. Or no, 50. Councilor McMaster, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We're up now for. What are we up for now? Taxes.
Morning again, Mayor and Council. We are continuing the presentation with a section related to municipal property taxation and balancing the budget for fiscal year 2026. Having a look at the 2026 municipal taxes, we start with a top row that shows the base level municipal taxation for 2025. That value includes the non-market change for that year. The second line shows the 6% increase over the base municipal tax. That 6% was adopted in the 2025-2029 financial plan. So it was adopted as a 6% increase for 2026, and that sits at 302,000. That brings us to 5.35, the 2026 base level taxation. To that, we are adding the non-market change revenue coming from the completed road received at the end of 2025. That is at 35,000. Adding to that, it brings us to 5.36 million. Continuing down the line, we have the C&I levy at 1.9 as presented earlier. It's adding to it, and for the 2026 fiscal year, the debt servicing value is at 36,000. That brings us a total of municipal taxes of 7.3 million. I'd like to grab your attention to 3 specific lines on which I will go on to the next slides. First one being the top one, the base level municipal taxation. Second one being the C&I levy, the 6th line of 1.9, and also the 7th one of debt servicing at 36,000. The reason for that is those 3 values are making up the taxes that are paid and used in this municipality for the service and infrastructure expenditure for a given fiscal year. So again, going over the 3, first one being the base municipal taxation. That is the value collected as municipal taxes last year and form the base of municipal taxes calculated for 2026. The second one is the C&I levy. That is the 1.9 million collected every year for use in developing and replacement of capital assets. The third one represents the debt service, the value that is paid in interest and principal on a yearly basis on the loans we have. So when we add all those 3, we are getting a value of 6.9 million. That is the starting point for the conversation on tax increases, as this value represents the base for the taxation. And I put a picture of how that is being split between the base and also the CNI levy and the debt servicing. And now moving into 2026 review, the proposed budget for 2026 sits at 6.1 million. And the 2026 taxation, based on the 6% tax increase, as I mentioned earlier, approved last year for the 2026 fiscal year, is 5.3 million, leaving a shortfall for the budget of 2026 of 772,000 before reassignments. At this moment, we can say that an estimated value of reassignments, obviously that is something that can be and will be finalized throughout the audit process. The reassignments estimated value is 189,000, which leads us to an estimated shortfall of the budget of 583,000.
Just a quick question. Maybe I missed it here. I was looking down, but the estimated reassignments, those are some of the projects that Mr. Rogers shared with us that will be, so those are included in this reduction.
Yes. For the changes. To mention again that the second draft present today is not balanced. Again, the estimated taxation is at 5.3. Now, in the next two slides, what we will do is look at two things. First of all, how the 583,000 can be covered. And the second slide is how taxation would be affected based on a few options that I will put on the screen. So we'll start with the 583,000 that we are focusing on at this moment. What I put are a range of options. There are 5 options right now. Can be more if council chooses so. But from left to right, you can see splits between using the surplus reserve and adding property taxation in order to cover the 580. So from the left-hand side, it ranges from using 100% surplus reserve, 583,000, all the way to 50-50 splits between taxation and surplus, which brings 291,000 for each area. Now, going back on the increment that we used, the 69,000 that you can see as 1% increase, that is coming from the base 25 municipal taxes, including CNI levy and that. Now I'll just go back to show it. So it comes from this value. That's the 1% increment that we use in calculating the options on the screen. So hence the second option, the 1%, you can see the 69,000 being added and 2% and so on and so forth. For the option on the right-hand side is 4.2, only to have a 50-50 split as one of the options. I do have available as well the continuation of that, meaning it can go all the way to taxation 100%, but I feel that this range of options is something that can be put on the table to discuss. And what I will do on the next slide is put everything together. Basically, the previous slides and this one where we can see both the coverage of the 583,000 and also the way taxation is being affected based on the 5 options on the screen.
Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Liviu. You presented 5 options that inclusive of property tax and surplus reserve. Now I'm wondering, and you mentioned earlier in your presentation about the reassignment of 100, which is another tool, I suspect. We just had our projects brought forward to us. I'm just wondering, are there other options outside of, well, you talked about the reassignment. Are there other options outside of the conversation around surplus? And I know we're going to have it, and taxation. But are there options that I may not be familiar with outside of taxation and reserve? And of course, you've already mentioned the reassignment.
To the chair, thank you for the question. There are reassignments. We already looked into it, and again, it's an estimated value of 189. We're working towards finalizing that number. Deferrals, it's another option. Again, through the work that we did between first draft and second draft, and through the presentations of the projects being done earlier, some of the projects, many of them were being deferred and moved. So that activity, at least for the second draft, was already achieved. And another option would be reductions and cuts to the budget.
Thank you. Yeah, it is to help because just looking at just this one, I just like to have a more rounded picture of what other options available to us so that we can have a more informed conversation about it.
Ms. Tatiana.
Before we go too far with talking about percentages, I just for clarity, I think we're looking at percentages in 2 different ways. And if we land with a particular percent increase, I just want to make sure council understands what that percentage means. So we could go back to the tax calculation just for a moment. So the base level of taxation on the very top line is last year's tax, excluding the levy and excluding debt, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So 1% of that is being that 6% tax increase is 6% of that base amount. So if we go forward to the slide that was just up there, the 1%, 2%, and 3% is a percentage point of a different number. Yeah,
It's quite a bit more.
it's quite a bit more. Yeah. So if we go back one slide, I believe one more. Sorry. I think this is the calculation that sort of brings us to that different percentage point. And I think for, just sort of given how council have made decisions in the past, the 1% that we should be referring to is that base number there, 50,000 or 76, just so we can total it up. So I don't know if you have something later on in the presentation.
It was the following slide.
Okay,
Yeah.
but maybe let's go there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, looking at kind of the 2 slides, in the 3rd slide, we are putting everything together. And this is where we can see, again, both areas of the exercise we're going through right now is the ways to cover the gap on balancing budget, which is zoned out to the 583. Again, based on the proposed options on the screen, going from surplus reserve all the way to 50-50 split. On the bottom, as Mr. Atiana mentioned, we do see the percentages based on the two values. And on the right-hand side, I put in the two values of base and levy and debt, that which is 6.9, and also the base without those two of 5 million. Hence, on the same value, the percentages obviously differ, and depending on what we are looking at, as we can see on the first column, for example, at 6%, that is basically, it matches the 4.35 in terms of base plus levy plus debt, because it's a bigger value of 6.9 versus 5. So that kind of creates a different set of percentages when we are looking at the two values.
Through the chair, for my simplified mind, when I look at the very bottom one, then when we're looking at base municipal tax increase based on those options presented, which I'd like to hear the other ones as well, before I get fixated on percentages, is what we then, instead of what we're looking at is when we see a 1% in green, it is actually in essence a 1.4 increase on top of that. So, and then as we start sliding down the line, those percentages incrementally go higher. So it gives me a better understanding of the actual true percentages that we're talking about on top of that base 6%. So that clarifies. So thank you. Let's make some of my decisions easier too.
Any other questions?
Any comments or direction? The intention here is for the third draft to come forward with 2 or 3 options for council to review. And if there is a possibility to narrow down the options of 5 or any combination between 0, we can go even like 1.5% or 2.5%. So any.
Do you have, Mr. Andrei, do you have a representation of a median value home tax burden? Because I think it will help, certainly help me understand, because not only is the median value home, just using it as a benchmark, going to increase by potentially 6%. There's also the loss of the homeowner grant for that class, which is another 3.5% for a median value home potentially, and then on top of that, the school tax percentage. So I think it would help me just to sit back and say, what is this actually going to impact the average median household in Tofino in real time? Do you have that?
To the chair, I do not have it on this.
Because I know that we've done a really good job. This council's done a phenomenal job, and I know the median value tax burden has come down or state level, all things considered, for I think 3 years in a row. But for the other higher end properties or business class, it has not. So I think that I just like to take that all into consideration. But Ms. Atiana, just maybe like we're looking for ballpark figures, just an idea of what it means on the ground for somebody who has to come and pay their taxes. That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, I may ask a question about what's to come in the presentation before I go into it, but are we looking at draft tax rates today and sample tax calculations for particular properties?
Not today. Just looking for a direction, and then on the third draft, we are doing it.
So, yeah, I would agree, Mayor Law, that I think some context to have a look at those calculations, even the draft rates, to see the impact of what 6% looks like for those properties that we consistently use year over year is going to help you make your decision. One thing I will mention is, last year, if we have a look at, or I guess if we remind ourselves what we did last year, is we used surplus to cover off what the pressures were in the budget. And when we do that on a regular, year over year, we create this, sort of unsustainable position. So I don't know if it would be helpful, but maybe for council's benefit, Mr. Andre, you could speak to the work that staff did between the first draft and the second draft to really have a hard look at those projects that were funded by taxation. And maybe some comments on whether there's an opportunity to do more of that work. To bring down deficit. You did mention it a little bit earlier, but just maybe for council's benefit, a little bit about the process.
Absolutely. I don't have in front of me actual values, but they're through the, for example, just to give an example, between first draft and second drafts, we shaved about 61,000 out of the budget, and that is aside from the assignments that I mentioned of 189, and also and also the deferrals that we had on a few projects. So that work will continue for the third draft. We will look into further reassignments, if any. We will look into further deferrals, if any, and see if the value of 583 will go down, but the work will continue now in the third draft.
I mean, is now a time that we, like, you're asking us to sort of weigh in on this, but I think the council, certainly council members have, some of us have said, hey, is there other options? What are we expected to decide now? And can we, I mean, we've got a little time. We still have an hour. Should we go back and look at all the list of the tax funded projects and services and say, hey, maybe there's something like that we should weigh in on, or do we just, like, what would you like us to do here?
We can absolutely do that if the council.
I'm just looking for options, because I know Councillor Steer said, what about the, is there another option? So that's what I'm maybe Setiana, do you have a comment for?
Yeah, thank you. I think we probably have a consolidated list somewhere of the tax fund projects that we could put up on the screen. I'm not sure if we do have that handy. But I think contemplating these types of tax increases at this point without seeing the impact on the taxpayer may be difficult for council, and that's okay to acknowledge that today, if that may be the case, and you can come back with a second report with a bit more information, because we do have time in this budget process to, we've given ourselves even an extra couple weeks at the end before we have to adopt. So I want to make sure council has all the information to contemplate.
Yeah, and I always ask for this too, and this is a little aside, is that it's always nice to see adjusted for inflation, so that when we look at that 6%, we know that it's relatively 4.5% or something like that. You know what I mean? So I always like to see that too, because I think there's a way to justify an increase that, we're paying for things that are inflationary. A lot of that cost is inflationary. So to know that 6% isn't the relative 6% or something like that. So I always like to see that too, just from a public point of view, to get a really thorough understanding of what those numbers mean on the ground. So that would be helpful. And I do know that we don't have control over the government's addition or reduction of homeowner grant or addition of school tax. So we take into account, but we're not responsible for that. But it is good to know that tremendously high per capita school tax, just top of that heap. And so it's nice to balance things. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I think just in a general conversation, I would agree with it would be nice to come back with some representation so that we can put it into context what each of those percentages will mean in the direct and Mayor Law is absolutely right in terms of what's within our control and what is without, but it's important for us to have that in context, what it means. But let's be honest, a lot of our conversations are the impacts to those that will pay the, I call it not burden, but obligation for the services that we provide the community. So it is important to understand that in context to inflation. I think every homeowner here, property taxpayer, understands the inflationary pressures that are there. But what might not be understood is where the other increases in terms of, because people just think directly of say a 2% inflationary pressure, and then we're asking for a 6% increase. So it's good to know in context what that all represents. I reviewed all the taxation direct projects. That's, to be honest, that's all I look for in the 2026. And I went through everyone, and all I was where's 100% taxation projects, and those are the ones I single out and look towards if there's any room within there to change or defer or what have you. And I don't see much ability in there. And many of the projects, especially within our infrastructure, through our C&I levy, which let's not forget is a taxation in sense, right? Those are funded through there. And it leads us to that broader conversation, community conversation on sustained tax increases above those inflationary pressures. And I know it is a question all municipalities face in local government. We're seeing, where you have the city of Vancouver, without going into great detail, a 0% tax increase, which is we know is not realistic. And I acknowledge the using reserves is not a sustainable way of moving forward. I clearly acknowledge that. But as one of the few tools that we can help balance, and I appreciate having that in context on the slide presentation. But we have to look at ways to sustain, because this is year over year and year over year. And yes, we have Mayor Law's point, just depending on where your assessment values were. We've done a good job, I think, at the local level here of balancing that out. But I can tell you, just from a personal note, some of us have faced substantial increases over time, combined with some of the deferral costs and some of the other things that Mayor Law pointed out in terms of school tax, et cetera, et cetera. I'm rambling a bit only in the context that we're facing, and this is even in the ACRD budget we're having as well, which when we start asking, because this is only one piece of it, we're going to be asking our taxpayers if we collect on behalf of those other agencies. And I can tell you there's going to be an increase through that requisition as well through the ACRD, which they will be presenting tomorrow, I believe. So we'll have that conversation. So I try to put all of this into context when we have these very specific information. Point of all of that is we need more information to be able to give you the direction that I think is important. I'll stop there.
Councillor McMaster, checking in on you.
I'm just picking myself off the floor. I think every municipality is facing the same issues. So it's the news we've got is not new to me. It's a case of we either cut something major, or else we accept a significant tax increase. And I know in Qualicum they're talking at 8.1%. So.
Well, maybe what we can do right now, barring any other information, is just get a sense from council where council is feeling kind of comfortable, red, maybe a red, yellow, green, or a green, yellow, red, whatever you want to do, so that it will give you guys an idea of how hard to go at some things if that needs. So maybe Councillor McMaster, I'm going to start with you. Barring all the information that council has asked for and staff are going to come back with, where are you feeling comfortable and where are you feeling uncomfortable? And let's go extremes.
Well, first of all, I'd like to take one look at the projects that taxpayer funded to see if we can cut anything more. I don't believe we'll ever get to 583,000. So that'd be stage one. I also don't believe on kicking the can down the road. So people in 10, 15 years are paying for all the things we're doing now. So I would be prepared to go pretty hard.
Hard in what way?
As in a tax increase.
So go higher than lower.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that, the 5 options, basically just maybe look at the bottom option, which is the the highest increase for actual property taxation as opposed to reserves or whatever. Which one would you go for?
I would probably go for a 3% tax increase, which would result in a municipal tax increase of 10.2.
Okay, 7.3% all in, and a 10.2%. Okay, that's just going to give staff a sort of an idea of where councillors are sitting and how hard to go at it. So great, 10.2. I'm going to go over to Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I find this one really difficult because I agree with Councillor McMaster. I don't really think delaying projects is going to save us any money in the long run because things just get more expensive. But I feel like the economy is not really maybe projected to be that strong that taxpayers can afford a big increase like that. So for me, I'd rather see it around 6 or 7.4 and get the services of the 11.8, but I just don't know if that's realistic. So I think therefore maybe I should move my expectations to 7.4 to 8.8, but I'm still uncomfortable with that 8.8. So I'm gonna go with 7.4. Yeah. And I would like to see, I think, the consolidated list of projects that are taxpayer funded, and then I'd also like to see how these numbers affect.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
I am also in favor of a heavier increase to the tax rate. Noting that relying on the surplus just isn't sustainable. We saw that the surplus, I think, was 1.3, but half of that is kind of accounted for over the next 5 years in the budget. So leaning on it fully looks like it would almost wipe it out over the next 5 years, and it would not be there as a tool necessarily in the future. That's just based on my general calculations for what was presented. Just noting that, we provide a lot of services and they do cost money, and we have a level of service that our communities come to expect from us. And I don't see anything that I would want to pull back on heavily. Much like Councillor Steer, I went through the projects and looked at what was 100% taxation, and I don't really see wiggle room in that. I think that staff work really hard to look for grant funding or alternative revenue streams wherever possible. And the projects that say 100% taxation are essential projects. So pretty strong about that. That's where I'm sitting.
So you're somewhere around, just to be clear,
On the higher end.
10.
It's hard to say, again, without seeing how those numbers do affect people in real time. Maybe I would feel differently if I see that and I'm like, oh, that means quite a significant increase, because that 10%, of course, I know doesn't mean 10% for everybody. Some people, what you pay will stay the same. Some people end up paying quite a lot more depending on their assessment. Okay, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Of course, before I address the percentage conversation, I do want to point out, in terms of our not kicking projects down the road, I think we've been excellent because we've invested in the C&I levy. And if you look at our major capital projects, we've done an excellent job of not kicking projects down the road because we've invested through a 4%. And this year, I believe it's 1.9 million that we'll be investing through the C&I levy, which we'll be asking our taxpayers to fund. So I don't think we've been negligent in that area. We've been very proactive in that way, and that's thanks to the previous work that has gone on, say, quite a few years ago now. So I'm very comfortable that we do not kick projects down the road. And so then when I look at those tax increases that we're requesting, I'm very restrictive of where that is. And so I agree with Thomas, when I review those 100% tax increase projects, I don't see a lot of wiggle room. So what I would look at, and why I was asking those questions in terms of what other options outside of taxation and reserve, because I do agree we should not be relying on our reserves to balance our budgets. It's just not sustainable in the long term. We know that. But there were some other options that you had brought forward. Some of them have already been looked at in great detail, I'm sure, and maybe there's another kick at the can that staff will be able to look at to see if there is anywhere that may be possible without neglecting those essential things that need to be done. So that's my first and foremost before I would even comment on where I'm comfortable looking at those tax increases or or going straight just to surplus. But if you were to ask, I'm on the other end of the scale. I would be looking at, I'd be curious to see what, when we get the information about what a 1% tax increase, let's be honest, it's actually 1.4%. If I look at the very bottom line, what that might look like in terms of relative, as we have in the past, we've had those relative property that we can have a comparison to. So I understand what the implications are that to the average taxpayer in Tofino. So that's my input there. I would love to say, let's just, look at what that 50-50 would be at the very high end, just to see what that, just as a comparative for us to be able to say, and to our community, what that means.
Okay. All right, well, so you're on the lower end.
Yes.
I have a general comment about, and it goes to the C&I levy. That was very well structured, planned out. It was percentage wise, and basically we've reached our optimal C&I levy projected revenue, is my understanding. And then the infrastructure management and replacement and et cetera, stays in there. That's what you have, right? You know what I mean? Like that's the bank, you're going to get it, and then the projects are mapped out of that. And I think what happens with taxation, property taxation outside of the C&I levy, is that the services and the requests and the desires expand beyond what we projected every year. And then we're left with trying to come up with more funds than we projected we needed, even more than the 6%, et cetera, to cover all of those services, which is fine. But it has to make sense and it has to be reasonable. And so in this case, for me, I would say, just at the top of my head, if we're projecting to lose the $200 for the median value home for the homeowner grant or anybody's home, and plus the projected increase, that's a few $100, and then on top of that, we're looking at another couple $100. It can mean the difference between $500 increase to the average homeowner or $1,000 increase to that. And then I have to think about, well, what are we giving them more than they're having now, like minus inflation and all those good things, and the catch up for not having taxed appropriately in the past. And so for me, I just think that if we were able to deliver, and this is just me, a service like a library with a common room that improved people's experience, we can say, hey, look, your tax increases are going to be another $70 a month. But guess what we've done? We've made our community so much better in this way. It's so much more palatable and easy to understand for the average person. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I would prefer lower because I think we're relatively going to increase for all the other losses and tax increases on out of our control. But we're also hopefully delivering some major improvements to the town that cost money. So that's my long rambling way of saying I'm okay with almost whatever, somewhere in the middle, as long as it can justify it to the average resident and say you're getting really good value for what you're paying more. That's my call.
Through the chair, following up on the question on projects in 2026 specifically coming from taxation. The total is 99,000 as we stand right now, based on the second draft presented today. So 99,000 2026 projects coming from taxation.
That's 99,000 total taxation projects.
That is
Okay. And the other 400,000 deficit for taxation is coming from, I missed that part.
It's coming from operating costs.
Operating costs, right? Okay. Satya.
Yeah, that's helpful for staff to hear generally where council is at. I think that staff need to do the work of justifying where those pressures are coming from the budget. Some of those pressures are out of our control. Some of them are within our control. There are some expansion of services that we do over time, and they're sort of unrelated to infrastructure. And I'll sort of choose the area of recreation, which this council is doing a significant investment into. And as we do that, those services have an inflationary impact over year. So, I think that time, to Mayor Law's point, tying the tax increase to very specific pressures within the budget is very important, and staff will go away and do that work. But having a look at the 5-year outlook, I don't think we're going there today on the 5-year tax calculation, is an important piece for council to see. We can't forget that debt servicing cost is going to increase over the next 5 years. We know we have the MRDT renewal, and council made a decision recently to request the 400,000 per year, but there will be an increase in that debt servicing cost over the next 5 years. So that, along with the change in homeowner grant, along with the changes in the provincial budget that we talked about today, and just the general economic pressures that we're seeing with respect to tariffs, we need to provide that landscape to council. So I think setting the stage for a conversation about what can the next 5 years look like, what is palatable in year 1 of the plan, and then going forward, because we know that that tax increase will be on top of whatever tax increase we set in year 1. That is the next conversation that I think we need to have. So we will take away what was discussed in terms of comfort level for tax increases, but we may come back with some different recommendations based on the sort of economic landscape that we provide for council.
Can I ask one? I'll get to you in a second, Councillor Stewart. Can I ask one thing? Maybe, and this is something that's been on my mind for a while now, is that your council and staff, rightly so, are looking at operations, services, asset management, and all those wonderful things. And then we try to keep our discussion and our lens through that, right? But I think it might be helpful too, as we go forward, especially with our water, is to say, hey, look, there's the potential in the future of a SOL, right? There's a potential for significant drought, potential that will be impacted. And revenues are dynamic, but debt and operations are static. At the end of the day, if there was, for whatever reason, a state of local emergency, to plan for that from the financial point of view, may also help council understand that, like, these conversations are always kind of the same, but in a larger context, hey, look, if we did happen to have a significant event that shut our major tourism industry down for 2 weeks in summer, or a week in the summer, how does that impact us? Then we would have to defer. We would have to look at things not through optimistic glasses, but in brutally hard, realistic glasses, and it maybe give us a little bit of understanding of we're actually in a very comfortable position talking about these numbers, but at some point we may not be. And then to realize that at that point, okay, it's not a what if, what do we want? It's that we have to do something. Just to give a little bit of perspective. Does that make sense to me? Makes sense? Yeah, Tatiana?
Yeah, when we went through the pandemic, that it became abundantly clear that we needed to plan and for risk in our financial plans. And we were able to pivot in that moment because we built some stability into our reserves, such as the financial stability reserve. And we were able to have a look at that long-term planning and how 1 year might look in terms of stability and sustainability in our investment plan if we had a hiccup in 1 year. And our budgets were able to handle it. You can see that our long-term infrastructure reserves were not heavily impacted because of that 1 year. And so we're talking about things that may happen that could be short-term, 1 year. But, if there's something that's sort of longer standing, like there was a lot of uncertainty around the pandemic, we had to contemplate what the next several years may look like. It wasn't going to be a 1 year impact, and when in fact we felt the impact a couple of years afterwards. So that's very much top of mind when we're doing reserve planning, and that actually relates to one final comment I wanted to make on the infrastructure levy. Mayor Law, you spoke a moment ago about that optimal level of investment, and when we originally tried to target that 1.9 million, it was based on what we knew about our asset inventory at that point in time. As you know, council has invested significantly in our asset management practices, and we're at a place right now where we have a more realistic look at what our renewal costs are. So we can't expect that infrastructure levy to remain the same. I expected an inflationary increase in this year's budget, and I don't see that here today, but maybe staff are working towards that. But we can't expect to have that number remain the same into perpetuity. We keep adding assets. We have plans to add assets. So that conversation is yet to come. Not in this budget cycle, but in the next budget cycle, and will have an impact over the next 5 years. So that longer term planning and look and today's decision or the decision we need to make on 2026 needs to factor in all of these components. So we'll take that away and give a more realistic look at some of these areas of the budget for you.
Super. Do we need anything else? You've got your general idea where councilor's at, so you know your envelope. Okay. Councilor Master, anything else you want to say?
No, I'm fine.
Councilor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Law. Just maybe this is just a general comment. I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but and I listen to Mayor Law and Tatiana in terms of all of the factors that go into risk managing it and the conversations around the CNI levy. And two things stand out, and I had the two notes for about those optimal levels of investment, because we have added things such as an $80 million wastewater treatment plant, and we also have a community that we think about in terms of the expectations of the levels of service that and Mayor Law alluded to what our communities come to accept as the base level of service expectation, and that may be a conversation we have to have with the community at some point. Because the reality is it does cost to operate those services, and the more services we want, the higher those operating costs to deliver those services are. You're right, council has made very strategic decisions around things like recreation. We thought that was incredibly important, and we still do. And so that is going to have implications if we go to the community and continue to have conversations with the community around what their level of expectation is around the services that we provide. I think will help inform this council and future councils coming up in the next 4 years for the new council to come in to have those conversations. And then, of course, those expectations shift over time. And we also are looking at we're just looking at our very small context. And I think, Mayor Law, you were alluding to all of those at the localized level, those incremental increases of things. And then we look at the broader picture, because we keep looking at these things in isolation, but they are cumulative within society. that have those impacts. And so it's my broad way of saying that, we have to have further dialogue with our community in terms of what those expectations and certain things are non-negotiable. The delivery of water and sewer, as an example, are, as Mr. Kirkland pointed out, are really those non-negotiables for us as a community and our obligations, legal and otherwise, to that. So that's my broader conversation. And that's why this, it's difficult to, to get so myopic in terms of this, a little graph and giving you 1% or 4% or splits, because there's a much broader conversation in the long term, those 5-year financial plan conversations or 20-year financial plan conversations. So don't stop. It's almost a lunchtime.
Okay.
And what we have also today is few requests for early budget requests to be approved. We have 3 for the second draft. The first one is the full value for Campbell Street Phase 3 of 3.2 million. Second is the planning expense for the library project, which is 482,000. And the third project is the Sharp Creek Dam project, also to be done this year for 45,000. To mention that the library projects, the 182,000 value comes out of the paid parking reserve, and the Sharp Dam project comes out of the CNI levy water. We'll leave the recommendation on the screen for consideration, comments, and questions.
Super, and I'm gonna get, there's one thing else I was gonna ask you guys to have, maybe, is to, for the council and the community at large, is to recognize in numbers the non-tax revenue that Tofino has been able to get, because nobody else is getting that, right? And so just between pay parking and the MRDT alone is over $1 million. And what does that mean in taxation wise? And so when we talk about services, like, this is a remarkable achievement. And if we hadn't done that, or if staff and council and the community hadn't gone forward with that, where would we be? So those are some things that I think I would like to see, just to also offset the perception that our, that our taxes are realistic, appropriate. So that would be another request I'd have for next time, if possible. Thanks. Okay, so we have a recommendation on the screen. Any comments before somebody would like to read this out? Councillor?
Move the recommendation that the following early budget requests be approved. 3.2 million Campbell Street Phase 3, 182,387 library project, $45,000 Sharp Creek Dam project.
By Councillor Thomas, any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried.
In terms of next steps, we do have the third iteration of the budget that will be brought in front of council on March 25th. So presentation.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Andrei. Nice to have that extra little bit, so thanks for that. Okay. But, okay, moving on to question period. Ms. Larson, do we have anybody signed up for question period?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We don't currently have any attendees in the gallery in person or over Zoom, so no questions at this time.
Okay, then we can move into the closed. So would the councillor like to volunteer to read the motion? Ready to get it up?
I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91C and 92B of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to 91C labor relations or other employee relations, 92B the consideration of information received in public confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and provincial government and federal government or both, or between the provincial government and the federal government or both, and the third party.
Your councillor Steer, any further comments, all in favor? Motion's carried, unopposed, all right. Take a break and reconvene when we.
Can I tell Duncan how long it'll be? Or maybe we can call.
When we ask him how long he needs.
Yeah, how long? Counselor Master, is 20 minutes okay, or do you want a little bit longer? Oh, you,
20 minutes is fine.
okay, you got it.
We'll make it.